Good morning again, everyone. For the record, my name is Richard Weinberg, and I have the privilege of serving as the rector of St. Margaret's Episcopal Church. Welcome to your annual meeting. So I'm going to begin with some orientation. This is the second year that we've done our annual meeting on Zoom, so for some, we'll recall how it went last year. If you're logged in on a computer, I recommend that you use speaker view. You can control which view. Right now I have gallery because I want to see all of you. But throughout, because it's a meeting and not a webinar, you do have the option of seeing everyone. So if you prefer, I would recommend you do speaker view so that the person who's giving a report is the person that you see. Sometimes during the meeting, we're going to be sharing slides, which I'll pull up in a moment. But at other times, we will stop the slides so you can see people larger. And also know that you should be muted upon entry. The settings control that, but we will pause it several times throughout the meeting to take questions or to hear from you. Unlike our worship services, right now you do have your own ability to unmute yourself and speak. If you're on a computer or a smartphone app, please use the chat box to make your comment or to ask your question. But each time after we take any questions, through the chat box, we will also pause to invite anyone who's on by phone to unmute yourself. And I'll give these instructions again and again each time we pause. But for those on the phone, you will need to press *6 on your touchpad to unmute yourself. I'd also like to advise everyone that this meeting is being recorded. And actually the recording, like last year, will serve in lieu of written minutes for the record. But if for privacy reasons you do not want to be filmed, please be sure to keep your camera off. And as always, apologizing in advance for any technical difficulties. We have done our best in advance to prepare and make this go smoothly as possible today. I'm going to pull up the slide and invite us to pray this opening prayer. May God be with you. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with us as we take counsel in St. Margaret's Annual Parish Meeting for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it, through Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. At this time, I would like to call the 2021 annual meeting of St. Margaret's Parish to order and appoint Farah Elliott as Secretary and Parliamentarian of the meeting. And I now would like to call on Farah to verify that we have reached a quorum.
Thank you, Richard. St. Margaret's bylaws state that at any annual meeting of St. Margaret's Parish, the presence of 15% of the voting members of St. Margaret's Parish shall constitute a quorum. St. Margaret's currently has 200 voting members, and 64 members have logged into this virtual meeting. A quorum is present.
Thank you, Farah. And we will now move on to the report from the Vestry Nominating Committee, and we'll hear from outgoing Vestry member Carolyn Eves, who chaired this year's committee. Carolyn.
Carolyn, you're muted.
Thank you, Richard. This year's nominating committee includes Miranda Cooter, Kim Johnson, Ray Minnick, Pedro Rivera, Barbara Rollison, our minister, Richard Weinberg, and myself. Slide, please. We are pleased to present to the parish a slate of 4 candidates for 4 open vestry positions. The candidates include 1 current vestry member who is eligible to run for a 2nd term. Our vestry candidates are our incumbent Hattie Mayer, Patty Nicholson, Giselle Paul, Susan Woods. This includes the nominated committee report. I'm turning back over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. I do believe the Spirit has been part of this nominations process. We have an awesome slate of candidates, and just for the record, want to note that we had questionnaires filled out by each candidate that have been available in the e-newsletter over the past month. And last week we had a chance to hear from each of our candidates in a forum. And I want to thank all the members of the nominating committee for their hard work this year. And now, as stipulated by our bylaws, we must pause to open the floor for any additional nominations to stand for election to the vestry. A nomination may be made by any member of St. Margaret's, and it must be seconded. And then the candidate who is nominated must agree to accept the nomination before they would be added to the ballot. So please indicate at this time if you would like to nominate someone by typing in the chat box. And if you're joining us by phone and you'd like to speak, please press *6 at this time to unmute yourself. Are there any nominations from the floor, either through the chat or on the phone at this time? Hearing or seeing none, I would like to move to place into nomination the nominees that were presented by the nominating committee. Would someone second this motion?
I second it.
Thank you. I heard Carolyn's voice. All those in favor, please react.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Aye.
The nominations are
Aye.
now closed. Thank you. Thank you. Seeing all the virtual hands, we can call the nominations closed. And before we move on, I do want to call on Miranda Cooter just to provide a reminder about how the online voting is going to work.
Thank you, Richard. Beginning last year, we received guidance from the Diocese of Washington to conduct our election through a secure online voting platform called Election Buddy. All members of the parish who are registered to vote as of the end of this meeting will be invited to, you were asked whether you want an electronic ballot or you need a paper ballot. We will see that the folks who have requested paper ballots receive them. And we will, in our LEVs, are also authorized to take some of our homebound first-year votes by phone. For the majority of you, now that nominations are closed, you will receive an electronic ballot in your inbox. Later today, you'll receive an email from the Election Buddy system with a unique URL to use. You should simply be able to click on the link and vote for your candidates. It will ask you to confirm your candidates, and then you will submit your ballot. The emails will go out later today after this meeting is over, and we've imported the names. If you haven't received anything by tomorrow, please let Garrison or I know, and I will put our emails in the mailbox. Garrison Gordon is assisting me in this process, which is awesome. So you should have the voting will close on Thursday at midnight or 11:59. So there should be ample time for you to cast your vote, and we will be sending out reminders. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Miranda. We can just pause for a moment to see if there are any questions about the voting process. And if you would put your email addresses in the chat box. If you do have difficulty, please do contact Miranda and/or Garrison with questions about voting. Not seeing any questions, so I think we can move on to our ministry reports. Our first report is actually from Reggie Cox, director of Charlie's Place, and he has recorded a video for us. Make sure the sound is on.
Good morning, St. Margaret's. Hope everyone is enjoying their wonderful Zoom service. This is just a brief report about the state of Charlie's Place. It's been a long, challenging year for all. But the staff here at Charlie's Place, we're very grateful we were able to serve and do our part to help alleviate some of the difficulties and challenges that our guests face, those that we serve. This was also a good time to reevaluate ourselves and the program to see best how to go forward. We hopefully we look forward to the future with excitement and hope. So we're very happy about the future, what we see, and I'm very excited. We also are in the process of kind of going to a rephased, kind of a phased reopening and a process. And so we ask that you keep us in your prayers going forward with that. I want to give a heartfelt thanks to Reverend Richard, St. Margaret's parishioners, and all our many, many supporters. Now, I just want to give a brief some numbers just from end to end from the time we shut the program down for daily programs to our kind of what you call our COVID existence and social distancing. From March 17th is when the program was actually shut down. And from that point on, I think that's when we reached out to have volunteers help make bag meals, bag lunches, in many ways, and clothing and things like that. So from that point on, like from March 17th to now, we've given away 8,000 bag lunches and meals, hot meals. 7,000 articles of clothing were given away in that time period. And grocery bags were we found a need for that because many people stopped by needing groceries. People were out of work; they needed food in the refrigerators and things to cook. So given that time period, given out 400 grocery bags. We've given away over 1,000 toiletry items. Also, we in the beginning we were going down to the parks, with some of our partners in various churches, and we were giving out bag meals every Tuesday. And we continue to give out, go out in the community, give out bag meals and lunches, hot meals. And so from that point on to now, we've given away over 2,100 of those bag meals and lunches out at the parks. And in this period, we've also seen some new faces. I'd say over like 30 of our guests are come to Charlie's Place for the first time. And then some of these guests who need to talk to a caseworker. So what we have is an outreach caseworker from Miriam's Kitchen. She comes in every Tuesday, and she'll have an appointment with them, and she'll talk with them, help them with their various needs, immediate needs, pressing needs. And I'd say she's seen over 25 of those clients, the guests that have come in. So we're looking forward to the future and with hope and with very excitement. Anyone who wants to help, wants to volunteer, you can go to the website and sign up. Now, in a phased reopening, we won't need as many volunteers at one time, but we probably will need people to back up those volunteers who will be coming in to serve. So please go onto the website and sign up to help out. Also, there's other ways you can help. You can help by doing little clothing drives for Charlie's Place. We'll always need clothing. Clothing is a big ask. So, especially men's clothing, we always need men's clothing. So please, you can help us by doing little clothing drives or go to a thrift store, get bags of clothing for us. We're always in need of that. Also, programs such as we need funding as well. So if you can keep us in mind, write a little check for us. We're always in need of that. We'll never turn that down. All right, thank you. Appreciate your time. I love you all. Thank you for all your support. Okay, have a wonderful Sunday. Bye-bye. Good morning, St. Margaret.
I would thank Reggie for making that wonderful video. And I'll say just a few more words about Charlie's Place in my address, and we'll have time for any of your questions later. For now, I just want to thank Reggie for the report and turn things over to Paige Cottingham-Streeter, the chair of our Stewardship Committee, to give a brief stewardship report. Paige.
Thank you so much, Richard, and good morning to my church, St. Margaret's church family. I am Paige Cottingham-Streeter, and I've had the privilege of serving as chair this past year of the Stewardship Committee. I want to just remind those of you who have heard me make presentations before, or any newcomers, that our committee is comprised of a wonderful team of committed parishioners. They are Michael Armstrong, David Bowling, Anamita Betancourt, Karen Castro, Annie Elliott, Chris Kimmel, and Andy Reese. And I'd just really like to thank them for the hours and the really thoughtful contributions that they've made to our annual efforts to support St. Margaret's through stewardship. This year, we focused on two areas. One is sort of the long-term thinking, and David Bowling led a team that considered and established an endowment fund. The endowment fund and associated policies will be important as we think about managing and administering bequests and restricted funds in the future, and you'll be hearing more about opportunities for legacy giving. But thank you so much, David, and your team for leading that work. We also spent a considerable amount of our time thinking about what would be considered annual giving. And these are the funds that support St. Margaret's operating costs. We have one slide that will give you the data that lets you know the success of that outreach. This year, we had 115 people or households. Units just seem so impersonal. We're dealing with individuals who responded to the appeal. And in that number are 18 of you who were new. Thank you so much for being a part of the community that financially supports St. Margaret's through pledges. And these are pledges that we've received. The total amount pledged is $497,841. And that represents overall a 10% increase from last year. And it's especially exciting that 52% of you increased your pledges. And so while we did have slightly fewer pledging units than last year, we saw a significant increase in funds received. And that's really speaks to the community, who we are, and also our recognition of the ways that God has called us to respond to the needs of our church and our community. So I just want to say thank you so much to all who have supported us, prayed for us, and participated. And I'm looking forward to gathering this committee in the couple of weeks ahead, so that we can think about the future under what I know will be wonderful leadership of a new chair. But thank you so much for the privilege of serving. Are there any questions? I'll turn it back to you then, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. I just want to say that the work of the Pathways to Generosity team has been tremendous. And I want to thank Paige for her leadership over the past 2-year cycle. And through Paige's leadership, we have been able to bring a very spiritual focus to the reasons we give, right? Our motivations that stem from a standpoint of this is just part of discipleship. Stewardship is about fulfilling the mission that God has given us, and we're blessed that so many people have affirmed our mission by prayerfully discerning to support that mission financially. And thanking Paige for her 2 years of leadership. She is due to take a break, and so we'll be announcing a new chair in the near future. And turning it now over to our treasurer, Kathy Connolly, to provide a report on the parish's financial position. Kathy.
Thank you, Richard. First, a few words of appreciation. While the pandemic paused most meetings of the Finance Committee, I wanted to thank the members willing to serve this past year. Martha Williams, Sharon Dove, Jonathan Nurse, Brian Valley, Penny Anderson, Blair Barrett, and Michael Armstrong. And I also want to thank Nibby Winston, the parish's bookkeeper, who manages the church's books and provides the Vestry, the Finance Committee, and Charlie's Place with monthly financial reports, research, and responses to inquiries. Now, I want to turn to an overview of finances and then specific 2020 numbers. We'll first look at the parish and then at Charlie's Place. In terms of an overview for the parish's financials, let me say, in light of the anticipated impact of the pandemic, the Vestry proactively undertook a review of the budget mid-year and approved changes reflecting an anticipated loss of income and adjusting expenses. Despite the challenges of the pandemic, however, several factors converged to produce a strong financial outcome last year. Those factors are the strong pledge campaign led by Paige and the Stewardship Committee and strong plate giving, the Vestry's focused oversight on parish finances, expense management by Tim and Richard, financial assistance to the parish provided by the diocese, and a loan from the Federal Payroll Protection Program, or the PPP. I think the first three factors are self-explanatory, the pledge campaign, oversight, and expense management, but I wanted to expand on the diocese assistance and the PPP. With respect to the financial assistance the diocese made to the church, it allowed the parish to pause our yearly pledge to it, which saved more than $40,000. And the diocese also provided grants to Charlie's Place, which covered staffing expenses for a few months. Now, regarding the PPP, you may recall last year Congress passed legislation to ease the financial burden due to the pandemic on businesses and nonprofits, including churches. As part of that legislation, the federal government made loans available on very favorable terms, and if certain conditions were met, the government provided a process for the loans to be forgiven. Last year, the Vestry agreed to apply for the maximum PPP loan amount, and the loan was approved. The parish adhered to all the requirements, and thankfully, earlier this year, the loan was forgiven. And now the amount of approximately $90,000 does not need to be repaid. Richard, if you'd put up the first slide, we can look at the specifics of the parish's operating financials. As you can see, St. Margaret's had an operating surplus of more than $98,000 in 2020. That's compared to an operating surplus of nearly $12,000 in 2019. Prior to the past 2 years, in recent times, St. Margaret's has recorded deep operating deficits annually. For example, in 2018, the deficit was more than $90,000. So an operating surplus is an unusual occurrence at our church. Back-to-back years of surplus are exceedingly rare. The factors I discussed earlier combined to create a surplus of this size. Now, the goal of the church isn't to have a high surplus, and I don't anticipate we'll see a surplus of like size again. If you look at the pie chart in the upper half of the slide, you'll see where St. Margaret's income came from last year. And know that the vestry, when it revised the budget mid-year last year, recognized our challenges, recognized we'd have a loss of fundraising income from the revenge sale, recognized that we'd have a loss of income from Maggie's cabarets, and the potential for a loss of pledge and plate income. You'll see the income of the church was more than $544,000, with the lion's share of that coming from pledge and plate, nearly 91%. Facilities rental was 8%. And I must say, Dignity Washington, a cornerstone tenant of the church, did not miss a single rent payment during the year. And other long-term tenants began paying mid-year. The other 1% of income was fundraising. That was the single Maggie's Cabaret we hosted early in the year. And the other income is comprised of memorial gifts and the contributions Amazon makes to the parish based on the purchases made by members on the site. On the expense side, which is the lower half of the slide, the bar graph, you'll see we see that reduced operations at the church led to reduced expenses. In fact, expenses were $30,000 less than budgeted. As in past years, expenses associated with personnel, buildings and grounds, and administrative costs were the largest. And that's followed by insurance, stewardship, services, music, and others. We'll now turn to Charlie's Place. Richard, if you wouldn't mind putting up the second slide. As an overview, Charlie's Place had an operating surplus of nearly $17,000. This is an improvement from the year before, when Charlie's Place had an operating deficit of almost $30,000. When Charlie's Place raises more money in a year than it spends, St. Margaret sets aside the extra or surplus in a restricted fund for it to be used as it needs in upcoming years. For instance, when Charlie's Place has a yearly deficit, that is, it spends more than it raises, money from this fund can be used to make up the difference. And the money in the fund rises or falls based on Charlie's Place yearly financial performance. Because of the surplus in 2020 and accrued funds from past years, its fund balance at the beginning of 2021 was $64,000. As you see from the pie chart, most of Charlie's Place income, of course, comes from individual contributions followed by grants. The largest area of expense for Charlie's Place, as you see from the bar graph on the second half of the slide, is staffing, followed by program expenses, which include food, paper and plastic, services of the barber, which continued during the pandemic year, art therapy, which was only in the first couple of months of the year, etc. Staffing and program expenses are costs associated with admin and buildings and grounds. And now we'll turn to the last slide, Richard. While the church's operating funds are held at TD Bank and checking accounts used for daily expenses and a money market account, St. Margaret's also has two investment accounts. These two accounts are managed by the parish's financial advisor, FBB Capital Partners, and are held at Charles Schwab. I'd like to just explain the two different accounts. The Vestry investment account, the top line, holds a combination of funds that are available for any purpose that Vestry deems necessary, including emergencies. Remember, a few years ago, we had a $500,000 emergency having to replace the boiler, and the funds came principally from this account. But it also holds funds that have been given for a specific restricted purpose and can only be spent for that purpose, like the Susan Blue Building Fund or the Stained Glass Windows Fund. Now, in addition to the Vestry investment account, there's also an outreach investment account. This account was created nearly 20 years ago from a large bequest. The Vestry agreed then to restrict its use to outreach activities and to only use the income from this account in order to preserve its value. You can see this account increased from about $279,000 to $305,000 at the close of last year, whereas the investment account really didn't increase very much at all, from $758,000 approximately to $769,000 approximately, even though last year ended up being a robust market. The reason why the Vestry account did not appreciate in the same way the outreach account did is because early in the pandemic year, St. Margaret's needed funds to meet its day-to-day expenses, and we had to withdraw $90,000 from that account over the course of 2 months early in the year. So when the market was at its lowest. So the account not only saw its value decrease by $90,000, but also lost the opportunity to realize or to show gains during the year on that $90,000. But as you see at the end of 2020, we end the year with total investments of $1,074,000. I too want to thank the parish for the opportunity to serve as your treasurer for the past 2.5 years. I'm pleased I'll be passing the torch along soon, and but would be happy to answer any questions you have now or at the end of the meeting or later by email or phone if you like.
Thank you very much, Kathy. There has been already one question, and I'll just go back to the slide that it pertains to.
Yes, so what is stewardship in the expense column? The expenses related to stewardship are principally comprised of monies given to a consultant to help the stewardship committee, as well as any printing expenses.
Other questions for Kathy at this time? I'm seeing a lot of love for Kathy, which I share, coming in the chat box. Any other questions?
So Ann Ritchie asks, where's the $90,000 from the PPP? So the $90,000 that we received from the payroll protection program were carried on the balance sheet as a liability. And what we showed in these slides really were only income and expenses from operations and not liabilities. The $90,000 will be shown this year by deleting that liability and by adding $90,000 as to non-operating income.
The 98 surplus is in addition to the 90,000 that was forgiven. Is that correct?
Gail, I'm sorry you broke up. I didn't hear you.
The 98,000 surplus is in addition to the 90,000 that was forgiven from the PPP loan.
Yeah. Yes. Remember the forgiveness happened this calendar year, but yes.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. We're behind. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Which does make that surplus extra noteworthy.
From Jane and Tracy, since the outreach fund is up, does that mean we have more money to commit for outreach? We do commit all of the income and all of the income from that account to outreach as directed by the Vestry. And so as the corpus grows, potentially the income grows.
Just pausing if there are any more questions, and a reminder to those of you who might be participating in the meeting by phone, if you wish to speak, you need to press *6 on your touchpad. I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege to thank Kathy for her 2 years of service. I know our former senior warden, Jane Quink, is the one who twisted her arm, but because she said yes, I had the opportunity of getting to know her very well and working closely with her. We have been through a lot over my first couple of years, and Kathy thus far has been the only treasurer that I've had the pleasure of working with as the senior pastor. And so I can't really imagine that changing, but I am grateful that her term as a voting vestry member continues, and that our next treasurer will be able to rely on her as I will for advice. Kathy is among the most dedicated members of St. Margaret's who care so much about our vision and our mission for the future, and that's informed by many years of association with the parish and love and advocacy.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all.
Going to move on. You'll have another chance to ask questions later if more occur to you. But I think we should keep moving on to the Wardens Reports. And so, Jenny, if you're ready, I think it's to our junior warden first, and then after her, senior warden Mike Armstrong.
Hi, thank you, Richard. You can promote the slide to the next. Yes. So my first report is reporting on the Building and Grounds Committee. And you can see at the bottom of the slide the members who've worked so hard this past year: Daisy Njoku, Todd Douglas Torres, Miranda Cooter, John Payne, Damon Clements, John Bello, and Kathy Connolly. Kathy, whose name I accidentally misspelled. I'm sorry about that, Cathay. But anyway, the Building and Grounds Committee over the last year has been working on a number of issues, ranging from regular maintenance, including leaks from a radiator in the nursery, to critical systems such as the electrical and fire alarm systems. And any time that a particular problem can't be solved in-house, then competitive bids are solicited and reviewed. So lots of work on the part of the committee. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of the important things that have been going on. First, the electrical systems throughout the church were brought up to code and upgraded. The fire control system, which is directly related to the electrical systems, it works and has passed inspection. I want to be clear to say that, but the control panel will be updated. So that'll be good. And plans are also underway to purchase and install Wi-Fi enabled security cameras at the back door of the church in the alleyway. And then something that's sort of happening throughout the property is a few windows have been replaced. Some of them have to be replaced according to historical preservation protocols, or at least maintain the historical look of the church. So that's all going on. And then, of course, ongoing maintenance of the rectory, which this year included the replacement of a window and the boiler. Okay, next slide. And the other committee that I wanted to report on is the Regathering Committee. The members are listed at the bottom. Again, Richard, Tracy Lush, Gary Collins, Tim Green, Linda Heaney, Annika Middick, Miranda Cooter, and myself. We've been meeting regularly since October 6th. And I know I've sent several letters to the parish, but I just wanted to reiterate that we're committed to the expanded table model of worship, which includes aspects of the service taking place in the sanctuary, while then offering a virtual experience for those unable to attend in person. So we sent out 2 surveys, and those have provided value information about your priorities and your wishes for moving forward. I also wanted to point out that we're liaising with Dignity Washington in developing a regathering plan and in upgrading our streaming capabilities. And Kathy alluded to in her report what a great partner Dignity has been with St. Margaret's. And I just wanted to mention that they are going to be tentatively having the first service in the church on May 23rd. They have submitted a report to the diocese through us, And I think this is going to be a great thing because this will, we'll be able to build on their regathering plan and see how things work out. Now, our immediate objective, of course, as a committee is to finalize the regathering plans for us. And that will enable us to go worship in the sanctuary. And we're hoping perhaps as early as June 13th for the June Eucharist celebration. So that's our hope. And monthly Eucharist will continue through the summer. And then we're hoping again that weekly Eucharist may begin in September. And please feel free to ask me any questions at the end. Thank you. Oh, and Mike, sorry, I forgot to introduce Mike, the senior warden, who will give his report now.
Mike, you're muted.
My apologies. Hi, everybody. I'm going to be giving you some updates on our ministries, and I want to start first with our LEV ministry that was led by Bertram Nagaraja. In 2020, we had 8 parishioners at St. Margaret's who required pastoral care and lay Eucharist visiting. Due to the COVID pandemic, the LEV team could not visit in person and directly interact with people. Monthly, each of the persons on the LEV pastoral care list were contacted by phone and provided pastoral care. The practice of the ministry of presence, where the LEV team could be present with our people in need and walk with them in the time of need. In 2020, the team's goal was to strive and respond to Jesus's summons to service by loving, caring for, and supporting each other in our community, specifically those sick and homebound parishioners at St. Margaret's via modern communications technologies. So again, thank you to Bertram and the team. Regarding Sunday school, John Williams and David Bowling report that the elementary school age Sunday school program flourished this year in spite of the pandemic. 4 regular students and 2 teachers, David and John, held remote classes on Sundays after the 10:30 adult service. The learning was reciprocal. The adults taught the kids about the Bible and the Episcopalian liturgical year, while the kids taught the teachers to be better Zoom users. While COVID-19 forced us to change the content of the classes, such as no singing or craft projects, sadly, they were able to continue using the very popular Whirl curriculum, which illustrates the Bible lessons through short videos featuring a group of sympathetic animated kids. Most importantly, they were able to continue creating a time and place for children to be together. David and John appreciate the kids and their parents' willingness to be flexible and to give virtual Sunday school a try. Regarding our teens, Paige Cottingham Streeter and Mary Alice Parks report that they've been meeting pretty much every other week, making their way through the book of Matthew, and they've been impressed by the students' thoughtfulness and dedication to Bible study. They're using a new app, YouBible, which allows for easy translations and word searching, various versions of texts, and even daily reflections. Ellen discovered the emojis and social-ready Bible verses for textings and social media posts. We are hoping to find a time for them to help in the church garden this spring, and they will be considering some classes on racial justice for teens offered by the diocese this fall. Also, the apparel sale was an example of the students' strong interest in serving the community. The church grounds and the neighborhood cleanup is an immediate opportunity to satisfy this interest. And when circumstances allow, they'd like to do something for Charlie's Place and the church indoors. Regarding adults, Ron Lorenzen chaired our adult formation with the intentional vision of Richard, our rector. Our online Bible studies and other adult groups and classes have actually resulted in an increased amount of participation during the pandemic. From the Acts, Daniel, and James Bible studies to the Advent retreat and the Reimagined Charity Seminar in December, they have continued to provide opportunities for people to take their next steps and grow in their faith by engaging in learning and prayer practices as a community. And Ron and Richard want to thank all the members of the Formation Committee and those who helped play the role of facilitators in 2020. And of course, more recently, we've been blessed to have the Reverend Diana Gustafson join us. And as Assistant Rector, Formation is one of the areas she now helps lead. Altar Guild, Jane Quank reports that the Altar Guild transitioned to supporting live stream Eucharist in person and for communion elements pickup. And she'd like to extend thanks to all for helping to decorate and clean for major holidays, especially Patty Lemmerman and Karen Castro for their support of flowers and plant arrangements. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to our two delegates to the Diocesan Convention, Genevieve Moreland and Sharon Dove, who attended the convention and a special convention this past week, and we'll be seeing a report from them in the near future. I'd like to now talk a little bit about highlights from the Vestry year since our last annual meeting. Of course, the big highlight was the formal installation of Richard Weinberg as our new rector in November. This was pretty unique. It was held virtually, but we taped some events in the nave. We had the bishop with us both on tape and live, and we had congratulatory statements from the bishop, special friends of Richard, and two of our former rectors. And we concluded with a parade past the front of St. Margaret's and a small walk by. Also, other vestry highlights. We focused on Charlie's Place with the revised plan and revised budget and a special meeting to consider the use of the Lupton Center as consultants to a new vision for Charlie's Place. We celebrated and we allocated relative to our financial health, loans, grants, stewardship, all of which you've heard about, and new allocations in the current year, including Diana that I mentioned a moment ago as our new assistant rector. We also, for the first time, established a feedback tool for an annual rector evaluation, including goals and measurements. Paige referenced the new endowment fund. And most recently, we issued a resolution on LGBTQ sensitivity that was directed to both the bishop and the dean of the cathedral. Specifically, after the annual meeting in July, we had a half-day virtual retreat and orientation. We appointed Farah Elliott as our secretary, and we really focused on the impact of the pandemic on finances, programs, and our parish community. We voted in October to approve a recommendation from the Outreach Committee to allocate $500 to Casa Abierta, a Costa Rican support organization for queer refugees from other Central American countries, repeating similar donations from 2018 and 2019. In November, the bishop visited with us. Following the installation ceremony, the following vestry meeting, she used her time to emphasize the importance of how our individual spiritual walk during these challenging times will transfer to how we vision and collaborate as a vestry. She indicated that the recent focus on strategic planning, the upcoming discernment regarding Charlie's Place, and the revitalized focus on stewardship were all indicators of a healthy and vital parish. And then earlier this year, we voted to renew our allocation to the clinic in Protección Honduras from the interest on the restricted outreach account totaling $2,500. St. Paul's K Street and Ascension, Maryland are also contributors to this ministry. And in March, we formally adopted our new evaluation tool in supporting our rector in his three articulated overarching goals of developing leaders, evolving Charlie's Place, and pursuing a dynamic model for hybrid and inclusive worship that demonstrates leadership to our diocese and beyond. I'd also just like to add that I extend my gratefulness to departing vestry members, Carolyn Eves, Miranda Cooter, and Pedro Rivera. Each of them have individually and collectively provided wise counsel. They've spoken truth to power. They have been authentic and essential to our success and to our growth as a vestry community. And to my dear friend, Kathy Conley, such wisdom. We will continue, as Richard said, to tap into that. And you have really helped keep us afloat. And on a personal note, it's been such an honor for me to serve as senior warden now, and starting with Richard as junior warden with Jane Quank, continuing through the rector transition, and now on this new journey, getting into a new rhythm. and looking more expansively about what our potential is as a parish. It's an exciting time to be part of this. I extend my appreciation to my vestry colleagues and to Richard and to all of you in the parish. I will continue to give you monthly updates and we'll be glad to take questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Just want to invite us all to take a stretch break. I'm going to do the same, which means you'll get to see my stomach. All right, just give me a moment to switch my technology over. So it's my turn to address you. I want to begin with offering grace and peace to you in the name of Jesus Christ. My friends, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to reflect together on the quite challenging but also grace-filled year we experienced as a parish in 2020. As you've heard in all of the reports preceding my address, the state of St. Margaret's Episcopal Church throughout 2020 and into this first part of 2021 is healthy and vibrant. In the wake of the devastating coronavirus pandemic, we've continued to connect with and care for one another, including our neighbors experiencing homelessness. We have adapted at what, to me, has felt like the pace of light speed to keep our church thriving and our mission vital. Thanks be to God. Perhaps like me, you're beginning to feel some hope about the future. Just more than a week ago, I got a news alert on my phone that said the CDC is saying that now half of all US adults have at least received one vaccine dose. Half of all US adults. I couldn't quite believe that that was true. Whether you're vaccinated yourself, you're still waiting, it feels like there's no denying that many of us are beginning to feel more hopeful about things. And yet at the same time, I'm aware we're still like smack dab in the middle of a cultural and societal paradigm shift. While there is plenty of reason to hope, in all honesty, we have to admit that uncertainty still outweighs what we know for sure about the future. To put this through the lens of our faith story, this time we're living in now makes me wonder if it's what Moses and the ancient Israelites felt like, particularly when Moses stood on the top of Mount Nebo when God showed him the vastness and the bounty of the promised land, but still they had not crossed over to the promised land, despite all that they had been through: liberation from slavery in Egypt, wandering in the wilderness for a generation, living off manna from heaven. Now God gives Moses a glimpse of the future, but Moses doesn't get there himself. It's kind of like what we're living through now. We have a picture in our eye about what's ahead, that there's going to be some sense of normalcy to which we can return. We can imagine where we're headed, but practically speaking, we don't know for sure how the rest of the year is going to go. What we do know is, like our forebears, we have faith that God will see us through and one day bring us to that promised land. But before I get too far ahead of myself talking about the unknown future, let me celebrate some highlights from my own perspective as rector, just to add to what has already been reported. And for me to reflect on 2020 makes me want to go back a year prior, because today is my third annual meeting as your senior pastor. It's hard to believe, but with a longer view in my rearview mirror now, I can't help but frame 2020 through the lens of where we'd been headed throughout my tenure, first as your priest in charge and then as your rector. Because when we go back to January of 2020, it was beginning with such excitement, such momentum. In 2019, we'd been through a strategic planning process. We celebrated our 125th anniversary as a parish. We recruited new leaders. We were welcoming new members. that was Paige's first year as chair of stewardship, which the 2019 campaign was one of the most successful in the past decade. By January, things were feeling great. You could feel it in the air on Sundays. And some of our data that we track backs up what we were able to feel. Over the first 3 months of 2020, our average Sunday attendance had increased by 11% compared to 2019. Another highlight I recall is when my partner Alban and I had the pleasure of welcoming around 100 of you cramped into the rectory for a housewarming and a home blessing. That was the second to last weekend of February. And then, of course, the last weekend of February, we welcomed hundreds of people for the funeral of our dear late friend, Susan Reese. And then came COVID-19. By March 15th, our beloved church building was closed. And fast forward several weeks later, we were hosting our first Easter services online. And we discovered Zoom and began worshiping together in this way on a weekly basis. And then we began logging in to study the Bible together. Charlie's Place adapted, which you've heard about, and continued to meet our neighbors' needs. We conducted our first annual meeting on Zoom last June. And last but not least, in the list of highlights, which has already been mentioned, but the privilege of being called and my gratitude for being called as your new rector. We had a very memorable and special St. Margaret's Day with my installation and our mutual celebration of new ministry in November. And as I said that day, while I was, of course, genuinely disappointed that it had to be online, as a parish, you rose to the occasion and surprised me in such moving ways. It was a joy-filled day for all of us, and I thank God for the privilege of serving as your rector. And now for a little fun part of my address, I want to invite us all to give a proverbial round of applause, offer some love in the chat box, wave, react, Zoom emojis, to thank some people in particular who have really kept our church going. First, Miranda Cooter deserves a medal for her Herculean efforts in leading our technology team. Have you noticed how every single week our service improves? Bit by bit, we have come a long way. And along with the help of Daisy Njoko and Tim Dorr, who's learning more with video editing, what I so admire about Miranda in particular is how strong her conviction is that this is work to which God has called her. This is ministry. We have all benefited from it. Like, to me, I think of that work and it would just make me stressed and give me headaches. But for Miranda, it comes from a place of vision and a place of creativity. And we are so grateful. Second, please join me in thanking my partner in crime, Dr. Timothy Dorr, for his administrative and musical leadership in the past year. Tim has met each and every challenge of the past year with a can-do spirit. His job description has changed immensely, and he has willingly learned new skills and done it all with grace. Tim has worked with an amazing group of volunteer musicians when we had to say goodbye to our paid musicians. And Tim kept our choir alive and active. Our musicians help us make a joyful noise each week in our worship, and how empty our prayers would feel without them. Just to share some cool and impressive numbers, under Tim's leadership, St. Margaret's has created nearly 200 music videos for worship, and that includes 74 hymns, 34 psalms, 37 voluntaries, 23 offertories, and 7 virtual choir anthems. It just boggles my mind. We are so blessed. I also want to take another minute to acknowledge the hard work of all of our staff. First, the staff of Charlie's Place under Reggie Cox's leadership. That includes Marie Graves, John Williams, Vincent Freeman, and Charles Shamwell. They all deserve huge appreciation for being our front line in meeting the needs and caring for our neighbors experiencing homelessness and food insecurity. I'm particularly grateful to Reggie and Marie, who've been deeply involved in the extra effort of beginning the assessment process with our consultant from the Lupton Center. This process is going to help us clarify our goals for the coming years and ensure that Charlie's Place goes from strength to strength. You'll be hearing more in the coming weeks from Garrison Gordon, our Vestry member and project manager of the Lupton Center process, and me in the coming weeks. I also want to acknowledge our faithful and skilled accountant, Nivelyn Winston, whom Kathy has already thanked, but she navigated all the extra work that came with the PPP loan application and many other things. And I want to acknowledge our longtime sexton, Damon Clements, and our faithful volunteer, John Bello. Together, they care for our beloved building when we're not there. They always go the extra mile. I want to thank also my fellow clergy, the Reverend Diana Gustafson, who's joined us in this new year, our deacon, Bertram Nagaraja, who flies back and forth from California and the East Coast to be with us. His time is coming to a close as he anticipates a new calling in California. So he'll be with us through August. And I want to thank longtime adjunct clergy priest, the Reverend Dr. Ann Gavin Ritchie, and our friend, the Reverend Rochelle Sam, for their clerical leadership and help. There are, of course, many others that I could thank by name, but we'll be here all afternoon if I keep going. So just one more final call out of thanks to our amazing vestry. Under the leadership of Senior Warden Mike Armstrong, Junior Warden Jenny Carson, and Treasurer Kathy Connolly, our vestry has led us through one of the most challenging years of our parish's history. Now we've continued to work while also fostering a real sense of community and spiritual grounding in our vestry. And that's added, I feel, to our effectiveness as a body. So I'm going to take about probably 5 more minutes. I want to talk now about my thoughts for the future. Imagining how I hope, from my perspective as rector, we prioritize our attention and our resources in the rest of the year and in the years to come. As we anticipate welcoming new vestry members, as we begin planning for reopening the building soon, as early as this summer, I want to remind us of the mission that we agreed on when I became your priest in charge. It's the mission, in fact, that comes from the example of Christ himself, as articulated in the Gospels, the mission of reaching new people. We have discerned that St. Margaret's purpose is to help people thrive as members of the body of Christ in our diverse and inclusive worshiping community. In other words, God's mission for us is to help people move from where they are now to where God wants them to be. And although we've weathered this pandemic with grace and in impressive ways, I want to challenge us as we envision the future to believe that we can still even be better. When we talk about returning to church, I think we need to grieve the fact that there isn't really going back to normal, because COVID-19 has forever changed us. For starters, we're going to be an online church forever. That's here to stay. Just a reminder, please, to mute yourselves if you're not speaking. We thank God that we have been able to have so many people join us from other parts of the country and even other countries. St. Margaret's is truly moving from being an in-person only worshiping community, being a dynamic online church with in-person options. And this is a huge shift. It's a challenge, and I think it's an opportunity. In 2019, we committed ourselves to evolving to meet the needs of the people who live right in our neighborhood. In that regard, I feel the pandemic has set us back, understandably, in really living into that goal. Just to illustrate this point with some numbers, they're the numbers related to how well are we attracting first-time visitors, how well are we retaining some of those visitors who then feel called to stay and become a member? In 2019, we welcomed probably at least 100 people who identified themselves as a first-time guest. They filled out a Connect card on the Sunday that they visited. And that's right where you want to be as a church, welcoming approximately the same number of people over a year who are first-time guests as you typically welcome on a Sunday. And then in January to March of 2020, before things shut down, we had already welcomed 13 new people who chose to become new members. And then COVID came, and over that period, the balance of the year between March 15th and December 31st, we only saw 6 new people become members of the parish. And even fewer than that number filled out that online Connect card that we dutifully promote every Sunday in our Zoom service. And this is not unique to St. Margaret's. All churches are experiencing this shift. What I believe with all my heart, though, is that St. Margaret's has the vision and the ability to lead the way in a post-pandemic church. These numbers might concern you like they do me, but they also can inform how we prioritize resources in the future. And I'm still hearing a lot of background noise. I don't know why. But now to put some faces to the numbers I've been talking about, let me just say this. I give thanks to God for the people who have joined us over the time of the pandemic. It marvels me that someone would find a way to church shop during this time. And what gifts you've been to us if you have been one of those new people. I give full credit to the Holy Spirit for leading you to us. And I thank this entire community for being the welcoming people that we are, because, well, after the Spirit led you here, you managed to be felt as belonging in this Hollywood squares of a congregation. My point in talking about all of this is that while it's appropriate that we turned our attention inward to take care of ourselves in the midst of a crisis, as we look ahead, I want to invite us to imagine just how even more effective we would be as a parish if we got more intentional about inviting and welcoming and connecting new people into our community. Because we want to help as many people as possible move from where they are now to where God wants them to be. And the tough love truth is that the church's old approach is not working. Building upon the legacy of St. Margaret's that began in the era of Rector Malcolm Marshall, when a ministry of care was first offered to the city, and then especially under the leadership of Rector Vienna Cobb Anderson, and ever since. Not only did St. Margaret's lead the way in adapting inclusive language in our worship services, you also experimented with the liturgy because you had the goal of bringing into the fold those who had been left out. It seems to me in a post-COVID-19 world, we're going to need to pursue some new ways of doing things again. Imagine one day when we return to our beautiful sanctuary, if rather than sitting in the pews that all face the altar as if you're watching a performance, we find a way to replicate this community and this intimacy that we've gained in our online Zoom services. How can we make our worship truly the work of the people so that when you are worshiping, you see your brothers and sisters and siblings all around you rather than just the backs of their heads? I've heard from person after person over this time of online church how concerned you are about letting this go, and wondering how can we maintain this sense of community when some of us begin to go back to the building. Well, I put that question through the lens of St. Margaret's legacy of always adapting our ways to meet the evolving needs of our people. The old model we learned through the pandemic is not working. So when I picture St. Margaret's 5 years from now, I see a flexible space in which the neighborhood can gather, in which those experiencing homelessness and material poverty can come together and be in community and advocate for themselves. I see a space in which people of all walks of life are able to sit down and share a cup of coffee, share a meal together. I see a space in which we can host concerts and theater, yoga. By the way, also picture some renovated bathrooms. That's what I see in the building, but I also see St. Margaret's continued presence as a virtual community, which calls for the need to invest not just in our physical space, but in our online ministry strategy. There's a thought leader, including Tony Morgan of the Unstuck Church Group, who's been arguing throughout the pandemic about something, and it's really, really hard for me as a pastor to wrap my head around, but I've been persuaded that they're right. And the argument is that your worship service is no longer your front door. Even for those who are finding us online, logging into our service is not going to be the first step that they take in checking out St. Margaret's. So how can our website and our social media channels seek to answer the questions that people are struggling with? How can, in addition to our worship and in our online programs, we actually minister to people online? The more we build up the health and stability of our parish, the more that some of us will be called to spend an equal amount of energy online as we do in traditional models of ministry. This all may make us feel a little uncomfortable. It makes me feel uncomfortable. But here's the thing. We must never let our methods get in the way of our mission. The ways we do church at St. Margaret's are not as important as why we do church. We'd already begun to modify our ways prior to COVID, and 2020 has only accelerated our need to keep changing our ways. But our why has not changed. Our why drives us forward. Our why stems from our desire for each and every person to experience the loving, liberating, life-giving God we believe in. Our why stems from our desire for each and every person to experience the radical welcome and love and inclusion that we have felt as members of this community. And so as we stand on the mountaintop of this moment together, like Moses once did, gazing toward the future of a promised land, as the Israelites were filled with great uncertainty about the future, as they still carried the grief of the trauma of their past, we too move forward with faith that God is leading the way. I give thanks to God for sustaining us as a parish in this most challenging year, and I join you in great anticipation for where the Spirit leads us next. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you everyone for bearing with us. It's already been an hour and 15, I see, but now is a time for questions. So we do open the floor and the chat box for your questions, and you can direct them to anyone who's given a report today. Thank you, everyone. So any questions or comments? Or have we talked so much at you that you're ready to go find lunch?
I have a question, but I don't know how we're doing this. Can I just unmute myself?
Yeah, please.
I've shown a lot in my own workplace, as I'm sure others have, to find ways for any organic collaboration during this Zoom work from home world. And I guess, unsurprising, this is less of a question and more of a comment. just that I would really encourage us to keep finding and looking out for ways to collaborate and get ideas in the mix. You know, we try really hard during our coffee hour to split up, but it's not the same as an actual coffee hour where we actually complain to each other or give ideas to each other, talk about different committee work with each other. And I've been craving that. And this last year, I have really struggled to feel like I know the right avenue for getting my ideas and frankly opinions sort of expressed and in the ecosystem. And I don't have a good solution for this. It's incredibly hard in this Zoom environment, but I hope that we will together keep looking for ways to solicit feedback across teams and solicit brainstorming and ideas across all these incredible teams that are working to keep sort of this church afloat. And then I actually had another comment, but I don't need to like just keep talking. So if others have.
Maggie, Jerry, is your virtual hand intentionally raised? Or is that from something?
Yes, it's intentional. I've learned that much about Zoom. The thing is, I forget to take it down after, so I'm going to take it down now.
But did you have a question, or that was from earlier?
It's actually kind of connected comment. You know, I became a member on Zoom in the Christmas holiday, but the reason is because Julie, who I've never met, was a friend of a friend in New York who used to work for Sojourners, right, in DC. So I had put an email out to my large network of friends. I need a church community. I'm all alone here in the DC area. You know, I have a ministry degree. So, you know, I had a pretty strong network to draw from, and I knew what I was looking for. And I'm thrilled. I mean, you've all really been so helpful to me. You don't even know, right? But I wanted to just encourage that, you know, maybe people haven't thought of inviting people to this because they felt like, okay, this is just us kind of making it through the pandemic. Whereas, you know, Julie invited me only because I reached out and her friend reached out to her, right? So I just wanted to encourage that as you get better, you're so good at this. And Middle Collegiate Church, which I have a lot of friends who are connected to in New York, burned down a couple months ago. They had already gone virtual. But, you know, that was a horrible experience for so many people. And yet, because they have such a vibrant virtual realm, they're really kind of still able to continue to thrive and then rebuild. So just want to encourage on multiple levels the idea that as you strengthen the virtual component and know how to bring new people in, to not be shy about inviting people. That's all.
That sounds to me like a call to evangelism, for which I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Maggie. And Mary Alice, back to you. What's your second comment, please?
Okay, thanks. Also, Chris pointed out that I think I was virtual verging last week, and I apparently did all of my work Zooms this week, logged in as St. Margaret. So sorry, that was my name. Oops, none of my colleagues pointed that out. My second comment is
good point of evangelism. Now everyone knows where you go to church.
Yeah, everyone knows where I go to church. My second comment is just a point of encouragement to what Richard said and our warden said about looking for new avenues of outreach. I am constantly in my line of work dealing with the most horrendous statistics about poverty in this country and feel so unbelievably called to look outward after this year of us making sure we were looking inward and surviving as a parish. Now, I just feel like I personally feel like we have an incredible calling to work on hunger and homelessness and look out of our doors, because we kind of figured it out this year. Like, we managed to stay together. And I just so hope that next year, a big part of next year is looking creatively at ways to now help, new creative ways to help our neighbors that are in such need, because we know the need. We know now after this last year, the need is so great. So that is my broad comment for our meeting. Chris?
Right.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Pat Hines, I saw your hand raised earlier. Just wanted to pause to see if that was a mistake or.
Yeah, a couple of comments. First, about the vision for the way worship may look like as we go forward. I would just like to put a plug in for seeing how we can make the service accessible to folks with disabilities. I love the combined service where we've all come together into one service, but I grieve that we have lost the gathering around the altar. That gave Ashley, who is cortically blind, really the closeness to see and the feeling of community. I don't know that we can achieve that when we're in one service, but that whole disabilities and accessibility is really important to me. Particularly as I get older and I think about what happens to Ashley if I'm not here to facilitate that. It would be wonderful to have a community of faith where I knew that she would be really welcomed and included in that. The second comment I wanted to make kind of related back to Reggie and the homelessness program. So one of the things that I have noticed before the COVID is when we went to the 10:30 service with everyone together is we don't really have anyone from the homeless community attending our services. And I know in years gone by, there wouldn't be a lot, but there were always some individuals who would sit in the back of the church. And I don't know, as we begin our outreach, if there is a way to make sure that the folks who come to our homeless breakfast program during the week and those services that Reggie offers, if there's a way to be inclusive and inviting to them for our Sunday services as well. That's it.
Thank you, Pat. Those are two really, really essential comments. Thank you for giving voice to them. Vida, were you trying to get in the queue?
Yes, I was.
Please go ahead.
And I realized what I'm about to say doesn't concern what we're doing today. That's why I put my hands down. But since you asked, I'll just mention to you that I'm planning on going back to Africa, which next year. And since you said that you're going to do virtual, and I'm happy to know that because I will be there and I'll still be joining St. Margaret.
Thank you for sharing that in this forum. We need to get more informed about your plans, but do give thanks that you'll be able to participate for anyone who's not going to be in DC in the future. Marty Williams is, please.
Okay, I wanted to follow up with Mary Alice a little more. In your first comment, you were asking for, I think, for better communication, and I couldn't quite follow what it was the point you were trying to make, and I wondered if you would be kind enough to elaborate on that a little more. It has to do with both our being together physically and doing things virtually, but I'm not sure what you had in mind.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have been clearer. I think that the example I use with my colleagues is that we don't have water cooler talk anymore. That unless you're invited to a committee meeting over Zoom, it's hard to get your thoughts out because so much of the casual conversations are, well, we don't have the casual conversations, right? We have invite-only conversations in a Zoom world. And I think that we should be mindful of that as a team and aware that that we all kind of had to dig into our roles this last year, different ways we serve the church, different ways that we help the diocese. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's been great opportunity for sharing ideas across teams and brainstorming across teams. And I think we should get better at that. I don't have a good answer, Marty. I don't know the right way to do that, but but I know that, we're missing out on something there.
Well, there's no question that all the exchange of ideas, communication, all the nonverbal exchange that we're missing by doing it simply on Zoom. So what I hear you saying is a plea for not to leave it all to being done on virtual. Virtual is very efficient and it's worked for us, but not to leave it all to that as we transition back.
Richard, I was thinking in listening to Mary Alice that as we continue trying to implement a strategic planning culture into both the vestry and the parish, that we perhaps periodically could hold what I would nickname what if sessions, where we could just have sort of open forums, perhaps in lieu of a coffee hour occasionally, or in addition to, where we could create this forum for people both in person and virtually to do what Mary Alice suggests, just to talk about observed best practices, new ideas, recommended course corrections, and just, create a new culture of listening that informs all of the strategic planning that various groups are involved in.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Mary Alice, and that kind of immediate response, Mike. I think I need some time to process the because I'm in a unique position, and in some ways, I think the position I'm in is part of the challenge, which is that the rector often functions as the hub between the teams that you're referencing, and that's both an unsustainable and exhausting place to be in for me. And it's one of the things that the wardens and I and the rest of the vestry have been trying to hold me accountable on, learning delegation, right? And that the rector does not need to be the hub of everything. And as of kind of empowered, right, those of you who are in either appointed or elected lay leadership positions to really lead and not let my involvement slow us down because my calendar is so crazy, that as a result, then we need to be even more intentional about thinking how those, in between the invite-only meetings that you refer to, especially right now when they are online, how that exchange can happen. But I think I need to process more the feedback before I can kind of even imagine what that might look like.
I had a follow-up question, and I'm not sure who this is for, but there was a info session several weeks ago, or it may have been months ago. I have no concept of time anymore, but on racial reconciliation education, to gather interest in that. And I wanted to hear more about how that will be part of our next year, or what team that will come from, or kind of what the follow-up to that will be.
Yeah, I would be happy to speak to that. And I can tell you that Diana Gustafson has done a great deal of work in taking the input we got in the info session and putting it into a tangible plan of action for the coming year. It's going to be slow work. Farrah Elliott has agreed to chair our history project, and they are currently in the process of recruiting members of that team who are going to examine St. Margaret's own history with race and racism. And then outwardly facing, we are planning to offer the program Sacred Ground in the fall, because in the info session, we realized how important it would be to kind of, number one, learn the curriculum, and then identify those who are going to want to be small group leaders. So there kind of needs to be a train the trainer over the summer months that would prepare us to then offer this more. It's a 10-week, it's not 10 weeks, it's 10 session program. So it would occur over many months, and it would not be tied to the liturgical season. And we felt there's going to be other news coming about what we're going to be doing in the summer months for formation, but felt that it would not be the ideal time to start the Sacred Ground Racial Justice Program in the summer, especially as folks are vaccinated and you may, resume some sense of traveling in life and that kind of thing. So just anticipating that maybe the heavy flow of participation in our online Bible studies and that kind of thing, that may wane and right size its level of participation and want to maximize that for the fall, when we also plan to host the next Inquirers class in the fall.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Paige.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for the conversation. As I'm listening, I'm wearing my stewardship hat and also just my experience as a longtime parishioner, and recognizing that we speak about pledges and financial treasure when we think about stewardship, but we also always make the point of valuing the talent. But this particular year has been challenging to try to identify the talent and tap into that. And so I guess what I'm recommending is that perhaps we, through the survey that Jenny is working on or in other ways, reach out to our community, because we spend time worshiping together. We kind of try to chat and get to know each other, but there's so much talent in our community. I mean, we all are involved in so many different activities, and we've seen how that can support the church, but I think there are other ways that we can support our mission. And so I'm just feeling as though if we knew a little bit more about what people are inspired and called to do and the talents that they have, we may be able to capitalize on what Mary Alice, is offering and what Maggie may be able to do. So I just encourage us to not lose sight of the value of talent. And as the vestry and you, Richard, are thinking strategically about how we fulfill our mission, we also seek the really wonderful gifts that we know we have in our community, but maybe we don't all realize that.
Thank you. Gonna, in the interest of time, call out a space for one more question or comment. Or we can just move to the final little part of our agenda. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, everyone. Let me find the right screen share thing. Well, it was referenced in our prayers and in Mike's address, but formally we want to recognize and give thanks to our departing vestry members, Miranda Cooter, Carolyn Eves, and Pedro Rivera. It just so happens that all three of them have concluded 2 terms, which is 4 consecutive years on the vestry. And those have been a very active and in many ways challenging, but very fruitful 4 years. And that means too that they have been on the vestry for as long as I've been affiliated with you, and they're going to be missed very greatly. I've extolled the virtues of Miranda's recent service, but Carolyn, as our wise sage, who just has that compassionate heart of what it means to be a minister of the gospel. We know she will continue caring for all of us and those who she counts as friend and fellow St. Margaret's member. And Pedro Rivera has brought a great attention to our mission of inclusion and his kind of lawyerly thoughts and minds, but also his big heart to how we welcome people and make them feel truly, truly welcome. And I know right now Pedro and Chris are on vacation on the West Coast, so they're not here, but we're so thankful to all 3 of these folks. And they should be receiving through the miracle of online ordering. Oh yeah, here it is. They'll be receiving a copy of Presiding Bishop Michael Curry's book, Love is the Way, and it actually should be arriving through mail service delivery today, I think, because I was eligible for one-day delivery. So we thank them for their service. And one final point of order on our agenda is pausing to give thanks for the lives of those who have transitioned to eternal life in the past year. On the left on your screen is Mary McHenry. On the right is John Newby. And Susan Reese, we remembered her last June, but officially she died in 2020. And so we wanted to remember her one more time. And then more recently on the right is Beryl Gill. Had the honor of presiding at a small graveside service for Beryl at some point this past fall. And the family does hope to have a more lively in-person in the sanctuary celebration of life at some point in the future. So for these dearly departed members, we give thanks to God and commend them in their eternal walk. So with that, I would love to move that we adjourn this annual meeting and have a closing prayer. Would someone second my motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Paige. Is seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. I invite you into a posture of prayer. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, ruler of all things in heaven and earth, hear our prayers for this parish family. Strengthen the faithful, arouse the careless, and restore the penitent. Grant us all things necessary for our common life, and bring us all to be of one heart and mind within your holy church. Through Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.